Good morning. Welcome to Rising. We have a stellar show for you today. So excited to tell you about it. Briahna, what's going on?
Well, Denise Long will join us to discuss that comment from Senator Tommy Tuberville. Plus, we'll get into new updates from Brett Favre's welfare fraud scandal. But first, NATO is set to go forward next week with flying nuclear-capable aircraft as part of a long-planned annual deterrence exercise. This despite escalating tensions between the West and Russia. According to the Associated Press, the aircraft will not be fitted with live bombs, and exercises are set to take place over 600 miles away from the Russian border. This comes just after the G7 renewed its pledge to support Ukraine through the war, quote, as long as it takes.
Meanwhile, President Biden spoke to CNN's Jake Tapper last night about the growing threat of nuclear war between the West and Russia. Let's watch.
How realistic is it, do you think, that Putin would use a tactical nuclear weapon?
Well, I don't think he will, but I think it's irresponsible for him to talk about it. The idea that a world leader of one of the largest nuclear powers in the world says he may use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, and the whole point I was making was it could lead to just a horrible outcome. And not because anybody intends to turn it into a world war or anything, but it just, once you use a nuclear weapon, the mistakes that can be made, the miscalculations, who knows what would happen.
What is the red line for the United States and NATO, and have you directed the Pentagon and other agencies to game out what a response would be if he did use a tactical nuclear weapon, or if he bombed the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, or anything along those lines?
There's been discussions on that, but I'm not going to get into that. It would be irresponsible of me to talk about what we would or wouldn't do.
So this NATO exercise of flying a nuclear-capable airplane, my understanding is it's like an annual thing or a semi-regular thing that was scheduled before the invasion of Ukraine began. So it's not a response to anything happening. It might be ill-advised to do it right now in this moment, but take that for what it's worth. What did you make of Biden's comments to Jake Tapper?
Yeah, Jake Tapper's question about what is the red line is the only question.
Yeah.
It's the question that I've been asking since February. Just explain to me what the contours of this are. How involved do you want to be? And why? This is the other question that rarely gets asked. Why is it that the United States is in the role of the policeman in this situation, regardless of what you think about the behavior of the actors at play and who's at fault? That's not really in contention here. The contention is, what is America's role in resolving it, and how much is America willing to commit to resolving it? And I found Joe Biden's answer to be completely underwhelming. The fact, it's not just that he doesn't want to have a public discussion about how far America is willing to go. There is no public discussion about how far America is willing to go anywhere at all in the public sphere. From the beginning, any allusion to the idea that there would be a negotiated resolution, which of course the whole definition of negotiation means that both sides give in a little bit, both sides lose a little bit. That has been characterized as a desire to bend the knee to Russia and somehow validate their invasion in a way that is morally repugnant and politically ill-advisable. But the alternative to that is obviously going up to the brink or crossing over that red line into nuclear war. And not only is nobody willing to really contend with that in the public sphere, we are getting dangerously closer and closer to coming to that point because nobody will be honest about the potential consequences here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that obviously Joe Biden is, I guess, not going to go into detail about what the precise retaliatory plan looks like. But the question is, like, would we do a retaliatory plan? I mean, obviously, it's incomprehensible that we've gotten to this point, and the whatever it takes, as long as it takes kind of rhetoric doesn't help without any plan to have a negotiation. But what happens if Putin, feeling cornered, feeling no way out of this, increasingly desperate and erratic, as I would argue he has been, engages in a nuclear strike on Ukraine, a country we are not committed to defending on paper, that is not a part of NATO? This is what this whole struggle is about. So we are not obligated to respond in any way, legally from our agreements. Now, we don't want that to happen. So are we saying we're going to say there would be that a nuclear attack even on a country that is not a NATO, not a part of NATO, not committed to be defended, that will invite nuclear retaliation by the U.S. or by its partner nations, irrespective of any undergirded
I think
alliance.
that's what's tacit
That's
here.
basically what he's saying.
And what is
but is he saying that just because in kind of the Taiwan sense, because we're trying to discourage nuclear action from being taken, not because we would actually follow through. But then if you don't follow through on threats, eventually your word doesn't mean anything.
And it's important to note that the likelihood of nuclear someone actually deploying a nuclear bomb grows because of the nuclear strategy that's been adopted since the Cold War, which is to make nuclear bombs smaller so that they are easier to use. So this idea that, no, Russia would never do that, or America would never do that because the bombs are so big and the devastation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was so extreme, and so many civilians died that who would go down that route? It's not exactly the same calculation that we're in now, because people have made little bombs that they feel like only devastate a smaller percentage of the population, or can be blasted in some of the scenarios that were watched through in a recent, I think, Times article, blowing up, sending a warning bomb over the ocean or in an unpopulated area, and to start building it up that way. These are all things that are unwilling to be taken off the table per the president and per the public discussion right now. And I think that should be very worrisome for people.
Right. But now, of course, Russia should take them off the table, too, by just vowing not to use a nuclear weapon and, in fact, just ending this pointless, costly war. But we don't have any control over what they do. We do have control over what we do.
Imagine if there were the kind of tone that said, all of us share one planet. As responsible leaders, we should both be committing not to use nuclear force in this exchange. Mm-hmm. But that is not, that kind of mutual de-escalation is not the kind of language that we're seeing right now from any corner. In other news, tech CEO Elon Musk is fighting off allegations that he okayed his proposed Russia-Ukraine peace plan directly with Vladimir Putin before posting it. According to Musk, quote, "I have spoken to Putin only once, and that was about 18 months ago. The subject matter was space."
I believe this was prompted by some journalist figure, some name I often see on social media. I don't actually know what their affiliation is, who suggested that Elon had been in recent conversation with Vladimir Putin, which now Elon denies, so I don't know who's right. Yeah. I don't see why it matters. Elon Musk is free to talk to Vladimir Putin. The plan that Elon Musk put forward. Elon Musk is not our ambassador. Is not a diplomat. I'm not. Yeah. But the plan he put forward was fine. It was a call for a peace settlement that maybe involves some territorial cessations to Russia in the part of Ukraine that is more interested in being part of Russia. He said, I believe in the plan, he said elections should be held, and they should be supervised by the UN. And then there should be a commitment from both sides to do whatever the result of that is. That is a reasonable plan. It's certainly within the ballpark of reasonable. Yeah. So I don't care. It's good if he talked to. I hope he did talk to Vladimir Putin about it.
Yeah, I do think we have a problem where there is an instinct to always make the argument of negative association, rather than to make the substantive argument about why a plan isn't good or why somebody's argument isn't good, especially in the Twitter space. There's a lot of, you can't be trusted because you work for this organization, or because you're a grifter in this way.
And it's a lot but that's actually, what I was seeing was a lot of, you're not an expert, so how dare you have an opinion?
Right, appeals to authority.
The tweet, hey, history PhD here, let me explain to you why you're, I hate that. There's nothing I loathe more than that kind of trend of experts with fancy degrees and PhDs, many of whom have advised catastrophic foreign policy decisions, who are hawkish by reflex.
And that's not to say that obviously expertise doesn't have its place, but on Twitter, when you're looking at people having these fights, you don't learn anything by people just calling each other names and saying that they're not expert enough to weigh in. Make your substantive argument, and we can see if it rises or falls. But I'm much more interested in reading why people think a resolution like the one Musk presented would fail or be inappropriate, much more than I'm interested in reading about how it's just Putin's talking points and therefore presumptively a bad idea.
If you put your academic credential, I'm just not going to listen. Not going to listen. Sick of it.
Well, I'll tell you what's on my radar next as a professional podcaster. Esquire.
That's fine.
Stay tuned.